Welcome to Claim Your Mind. I'm Sid, and today we are diving into the dark truth behind the U.S. China tariff deal. But first, let's rewind to how this economic firestorm ignited in the first place. On April 2, 2025, dubbed Liberation Day by President Trump, the U.S. unleashed crippling 145% tariffs on Chinese imports, targeting everything from technology to textiles. And Mr. Trump's goal? His goal was to force China to curb trade imbalances and fentanyl precursor exports. China didn't flinch. They retaliated with 125% tariffs on US goods and choked off critical mineral exports like rare earths. Trade froze, ports emptied, and global supply chains scrambled. American businesses bled, consumers faced soaring prices, and whispers of recession grew louder as the days passed. This wasn't just a trade standoff, it was economic warfare, shredding diplomatic norms and setting the stage for a shaky truce. Disclaimer: this episode drew on reports from the New York Times, BBC News, Reuters, and the Tax Foundation, amongst others, for the context on U.S. China tariff deal. All opinions are my own, with malice to none and all. Now, with the disclaimer set aside, let us look beyond the optics and unpack the real story. Let's set the stage. After the earlier one-upmanship tariff war between US and China in early May 2025, the US and China announced a deal to slash tariffs after months of economic brinkmanship. US tariffs on Chinese goods dropped from a staggering 145% to 30%, while China cut its retaliatory tariffs on American products from 125% to 10%. Sounds great, right? Well, this 90-day pause was negotiated in Geneva, hailed as a de-escalation between the world's two largest economies. Markets surged, businesses sighed in relief, and President Trump called it a total reset in US-China relations. Sounds like a win-win deal, right? Well, hold your horses and look beyond what is visible. Look beyond the optics. Now here is the first dark truth. This deal isn't the victory it's being spun as. It's a retreat dressed up as a triumph. Let's go back to April 2, 2025, what Mr. Trump called Liberation Day. He slapped triple-digit tariffs on Chinese imports, aiming to force Beijing to bend on trade imbalances and fentanyl precursor chemicals. China hit back hard, matching US tariffs and adding non-tariff measures like restricting critical mineral exports. Think rare earths, which are vital for everything from smartphones to missiles. The result? Trade between the two nations practically froze and came to a standstill. American importers were on the brink of bankruptcy. Chinese factories shuttered and global supply chains started rerouting to places like Vietnam and Mexico. Now here's where it gets murky. The Trump administration claimed these tariffs were about protecting American workers and curbing Chinese unfair trade practices. But the reality? There were high-stake gambles that backfired. The tariffs didn't just hurt China, they crushed American businesses and consumers alike. Ports saw shipments plunge, manufacturing jobs started vanishing, and economists began whispering about a looming recession. The Tax Foundation estimated these tariffs would cost the average US household $1,200 in 2025 alone. And that's not exactly making America wealthy again, is it? So why the sudden deal? The dark truth is that US blinked first. Despite Mr. Trump's tough posturing, the economic pain was too much for US to sustain. American companies, from small importers to retail giants, were screaming for relief. The US, being a democracy, could not ignore it. Whereas China held a domestic political advantage here. The stock market was in turmoil and Mr. Trump's approval ratings were taking a big hit. Meanwhile, China, though hurting, played the long game. Beijing's leadership under Mr. Xi Jinping knew they could weather the storm better than the US could. Their economy, even though export-reliant, had been diversifying. And they've been cozying up to other markets like EU and Southeast Asia. As one analyst put it, China was in a psychological stronger position all the way. Now let's talk about what this deal didn't achieve. The White House is spinning this deal as a step towards balanced trade. But where are the concessions from the China? Back in 2020, Mr. Trump's Phase 1 deal promised $200 billion in Chinese purchases of US goods. Fact check: China didn't come close to meeting their target as advertised by Mr. Trump. This time around, There's a vague talk of China buying more American agricultural products, but no hard commitments, no reforms on intellectual property theft, no promises to open Chinese markets to US firms, and no resolution on fentanyl precursors. Mr. Scott Kennedy from the Center for Strategic and International Studies called it an almost complete US retreat. That's not a deal, that's a timeout, a strategic timeout. Now here's another dark truth. The tariffs are still sky high. At 30%, US tariffs on Chinese goods are triple what they were before Mr. Trump's second term. Add in additional 10% baseline tariff on all imports and 20% fentanyl tariff, and Chinese products like electric vehicles facing duties as high as 100%. For the American consumers, that means pricier smartphones, clothes and holiday gifts. On the flip side, China's 10% tariff on US goods still stings for American exporters like soybean farmers who already lost market share to Brazil and Argentina. This isn't a resolution, it's a band-aid on a fractured trade relationship. A compound multiple fracture, not even a simple fracture. Now let's zoom out. What does this mean for the global power play? The U.S. China trade war isn't just about tariffs, it's a battle for economic supremacy. Mr. Trump's strategy is clear: use tariffs to force manufacturing back to the US and reduce reliance on China. But the dark truth is that decoupling is a fantasy. China dominates global supply chains, assembling everything from iPhones to medical equipment and even the toys that our children play with. China is the world's largest manufacturing hub, a reality no one can ignore or belittle. Rerouting to other countries sounds very nice, but it's costly and slow. Both sides are posturing, but neither wants a full economic divorce. Treasury Secretary Mr. Scott Bessent said, and summarized it the best: neither side wants a decoupling. Why? Because the US and China are too intertwined. The US imports from China in 2024 were $440 billion, while China relies on American soybean and pharmaceuticals and technology. A total collapse would tank both economies and drag the world into a recession. So this 90-day truce buys time, but it's fragile ceasefire. If talks sour, tariffs could spike again and we are back to square one. Expect the unexpected in Mr. Trump's new America. So what's the real cost of this deal? For starters, it's a hit to American credibility. Mr. Trump's tariff blitz was supposed to show strength, but backing down after weeks of chaos signals weakness. China's state media is already framing it as a US surrender, boosting Mr. Xi's image as a defiant strongman. For American businesses, the uncertainty lingers. The 90-day window means companies are rushing to move goods now, but long-term investments, like building new factories, are on hold. And for consumers, the pain is just delayed. Higher tariffs, even at 30%, will keep prices elevated, especially as retailers gear up for back to school and holiday seasons. But the darkest truth of all, this deal doesn't fix the root cause. The US trade deficit with China, $295 billion in 2024, that remains a sore point. China's subsidies, intellectual property practices and market barriers are still unaddressed. Mr. Trump's tariffs were a blunt weapon, but they didn't force structural change. Instead, they exposed how dependent the US still is on Chinese manufacturing. And China? They're doubling down, investing in technology and alternative markets to reduce their own reliance on the US. This isn't a reset, it's a stalemate. Now let's talk about what the world needs to watch out for after this deal. The events leading up to the Liberation Day tore up the gentlemanly trust-based rules of global relations, and that's a dangerous precedent. When the US and China went all in with triple-digit tariffs, export bans and economic warfare, they showed the world that might makes right. Diplomacy was sidelined and raw power and sheer optics took the center stage. This deal may have paused the chaos, but it hasn't restored the trust or rebuilt the guardrails. Other nations, think India, the EU or even smaller players like South Korea, are now on the edge. Knowing that US and China are willing to weaponize trade without warning, global trust is lost. And here's what is at stake. This precedence could flare up anytime, anywhere, in any part of the world. The 90-day truce is a ticking clock, and if talks collapse, we could see a return to tariff escalation, or worse, targeted sanctions, tech bans, or even military posturing in hotspots like the South China Sea or even the Indian subcontinent covering Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. The smaller economies caught in the crossfire face the risk of collateral damage. Imagine African nations losing access to Chinese infrastructure loans or European firms getting squeezed by secondary sanctions. The global economy is still reeling from the supply chain disruptions, and another round of U.S China brinkmanship could tip it into chaos. Plus, this deal emboldens other countries to play hardball. Look at how Turkey or India might start flexing their own trade barriers inspired by the U.S China playbook. Yes, of course, US and China led by example, a devastating, scary example for sure. The world needs to be vigilant. Governments should diversify trade partners to avoid over-reliance on either superpower. Businesses must stress test their supply chains for sudden shocks. And we as citizens? We need to demand leaders who prioritize stability over hyper-nationalist populist stunts. Because if the US and China keep playing this game of economic catch me if you can, the fallout won't just stay in Washington or Beijing. It'll hit every corner of the globe. Now here's my take. Tariffs can be a tool, but they are not a strategy. The US needs to invest in its own manufacturing, innovation and alliances to compete with China, not just slap on taxes and hope for the best. This deal buys breathing room, but it's no cause for celebration. It's a reminder that in the global power play, quick wins are rare and missteps are costly. The dark truth is that both sides are playing a dangerous game, and what is at stake in this game? Geopolitical peace, economic stability, technological dominance, global influence, and much more. That's all for today's episode of Claim Your Mind. If you found this deep dive eye-opening, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop your thoughts in the comments. What do you think this tariff deal means for the future? Until next time, keep questioning, look beyond the optics, and stay curious. Bye-bye.